Yes, thank you everyone for joining today's Hindu University of America webinar on the yoga of the Yoga Sutras with Dr. Sriram Sarvatam. I'm Ankur Patel, Director of Advancement of Hindu University of America. Thank you for joining today. And so, in today's times, I feel, and I know I have a turbulent mind. So the question in this webinar we're starting with is, how do we transform a turbulent mind into a tranquil mind? Well, over 2,000 years before the West invented the discipline of psychology, Maharishi Patanjali codified the principles of yoga in the Yoga Sutras. And it is the key to not only accomplishing a tranquil mind, but it opens the doors to excellence in action, natural leadership qualities, and a life of harmony and higher values and virtues. So in this webinar, Dr. Sriram Sarvatam is going to introduce the importance of studying yoga through the Yoga Sutras. We know there's so many more layers than just the asanas, and we're going to start with that. So Dr. Sriram Sarvatam, let me give him an introduction. He's been an ardent practitioner of yoga since childhood. He's been teaching since 1991 in India. He's taught over 300 workshops and retreats all over the USA. He uses the texts, right, like Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the Bhagavad Gita, the Hatha Yoga, Pradipika, and so many other core texts in the principles to teach and train. It really helps you elevate the quality of yoga practice. And Sriramji has given lectures, demonstrations, workshops at prestigious conferences such as the Yoga Alliance Leadership Conference, the Texas Yoga Conference, Texas Medical Conference. He's a founding member of the Ekashri Schools of Yoga and is also a faculty member of the teacher training program of Yoga Bharati. He's earned awards. He's also an electrical engineer. He got his computer engineering degree from Rice University. He works as a engineer in the Bay Area now, but we are here because of his expertise on the yoga of the Yoga Sutras and so many other aspects of that. So with that introduction, let me hand it to Sriramji.
Namaste. Namaste, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on the yoga of the Yoga Sutras. Thank you so much, Ankurji, for the beautiful introduction. And I would especially like to highlight what you said, that the study of the yoga scriptures can profoundly elevate the quality of our yoga practice. So rather than doing our yoga sadhana in a mechanical way, we can bring in the wisdom of yoga that underlies all our yoga sadhana, and especially the study of the texts, the classic texts on yoga, such as the Yoga Sutras, the Bhagavad Gita, Yoga Yajnavalkya, Hatha Yoga Pratipika. All these texts on yoga, they give the wisdom behind these practices. So not only do we do the practice, we also know why we are doing the practice. What are the benefits of doing these practices? What are the benefits of each element of the practice, such as asanas, pranayama, and so forth. So in today's webinar, I will give a brief introduction, a brief overview on what the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali is all about. So I have made a little slide deck, and let me go ahead and share the slides here. Okay. So the yoga of the Yoga Sutras, I'm going to begin with a short Dhyana shlokam, an invocation chant on Maharishi Patanjali. It has 3 shlokas, and I will chant these 3 shlokas to begin our webinar today. Yastyatva rupamadhyam prabhavati jagatah anekada anugrahaya prakshina klesharashihi vishama vishadharah anekavaktrastu bhogi sarvajnana prasutihi bhujaga parikarah pritaye yasya nityam devo hishah savo vyat sita vimala tanuhu योगदो योगयुक्तः योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचाम् मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनाम् पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिं श्रीमते अनन्ताय नागराजाय नमो नमः अस्मदाचार्येभ्यः सर्वेभ्यो नमो नमः ॐ Once again, warm welcome to everyone who has joined the webinar. So, brief meaning, a short translation of the three shlokas that I just chanted. The first shloka, the meaning is that we are grateful to the Maharishi Patanjali, the great Rishi Patanjali, who has descended from the Vaikuntha into this our realm, the earth, to give the teachings of yoga. It is regarded that Maharishi Patanjali is an incarnation of Adisesha. Adisesha incarnated in the form of Patanjali to bestow the knowledge and the practice of yoga to humanity, and for that we are grateful. In the second shloka, we express our gratitude to Maharishi Patanjali for bestowing humanity with three great works. Yoga Sutras is just one of them. So Patanjali, the propounder of yoga, of course, the practice and wisdom of yoga existed even before Patanjali, but he systematically codified the practice and the wisdom of yoga. He also made other big contributions. He's the author of Mahabhashya, a great work on Sanskrit grammar. So for bestowing humanity with clarity of speech, we are grateful to Patanjali. And also, Maharishi Patanjali is credited with text on Ayurveda. So as a healer, he has bestowed the science of healing to humanity. So for these three great works, we are grateful to him. And in the third invocation chant, it describes the form of Maharishi Patanjali, and this is more metaphoric. So it talks about the upper body as being in the form of the human and crowned by a 1,000-headed cobra. And here, cobra refers to the quality of alertness in the mind. It's a metaphor for alertness. And 1,000-headed cobra means a fully blossomed, awakened mind. And Patanjali holding a conch and a disc. The conch refers to the divine sound, the sound that bestows knowledge. And the disc here, the chakra, refers to the discriminative power of the mind that can resolve the difference between what is real and what is unreal. So this is the brief translation of the invocation chant. So let us begin by asking what is a sutra and how is a sutra different from other types of writing, such as the shloka versus sutra. So there is a definition of what sutra is. In fact, the literal definition of the word sutra means thread. It's a thread of knowledge. In fact, the English word suture and the Sanskrit word sutra, they come from the same root. So a thread of knowledge, a thread that connects different strands. Sutre Manigana Iva. In Bhagavad Gita, we see the thread that connects the different strands. So the thread of knowledge that connects the different aspects of yoga is the Yoga Sutras. And in order to technically qualify as a sutra form of writing, it should qualify these 6 attributes. What are these 6 attributes? So let me briefly chant the shloka here. Alpaksharam asandigdam saravat vishwato mukham astobham anavadyam cha Sutra vido viduhu. Meaning of this is, in order to qualify as a sutra form of writing, the great scholars, the viduhu, Sutra vido viduhu, people who are knowledgeable in this area, who are experts in this area, they give 6 attributes for sutra. What are they? The first one is alpaksharam. Alpaksharam means with a few words. The text is not verbose. It is concise. It is pithy. So in a very few words, we pack a lot of meaning into it. We compress the entirety of knowledge in that area into a few words. The second attribute is asandigdham, which means the knowledge that is presented in the sutra is very clear. It is not ambiguous. It does not lend itself to different translations or different meanings. The meaning is very, very clear. The third facet of the sutra is Saravat. It captures the essence of that text. So the Yoga Sutra captures the heart of yoga, the essence, the core principles of yoga. The fourth is Vishwato Mukham. That means it gives a complete, a global perspective about that subject. It's a complete treatise. It is not just a partial text, it is a complete text. And the fifth one is Astobam. Astobam means there are no filler words. Stoba means filler words. Sometimes in shlokas, we see filler words in order to comply with the rhythm, the meter, the chanda. Sometimes we use the stoba, filler words. But a sutra form of writing is devoid of filler words, or it is devoid of repetitions as well. Once an idea is presented, it will not be referred to again in the sutra. So there are no repetitions, no filler words. It is absolutely reduced to very few words. And the final attribute of sutra form of writing is anavadyam, which means it contains irrefutable knowledge, irrefutable truth. It cannot be disproved. So you can think of these as the axioms of yoga, the fundamental tenets of that subject matter. So these are the 6 attributes of sutra form of writing. And this is how Patanjali presents his teachings in the form of sutras. So in order to understand a little bit more about what the sutra form of writing is, here is a depiction of a bull by the great artist Picasso. So to capture the essence of the form of the bull, so if you try to remove some of the superficial aspects, and if you had to render the form of the bull in a very few brush strokes, so what can you do? And Picasso, uh, it requires great insight to identify what are the crucial features, what are the irreducible features that you absolutely need in order to define the form of the bull. So like that, when we look at any subject matter, in order to capture the essential principle, it is not a very easy thing to do. So Patanjali has done an amazing job of capturing the heart of yoga in a very few words. So this requires great insight, very profound clarity on that subject. To give another example would be the 3 laws of Newton. So the entire classical physics has been compressed into these 3 words, these 3 sentences. And each statement of the 3 laws of Newton capture great truth. For example, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So it has so many profound implications. And in fact, it also resembles our karma theory. Every action has equal or opposite reaction. So in these 3 statements, Isaac Newton was able to capture the entirety of the classical physics. So like that, to capture the essence of something, it requires great insight. Like a genius like Maharishi Patanjali can compress yoga into the sutra form and present to us what are the basic tenets of yoga philosophy. So what does the Patanjali Yoga Sutras comprise of? So there are a total of 195 sutras or 196, depending on which version that you are referring to. In some version, there is an extra sutra in the third chapter. So most of the versions contain 195 sutras that are divided into 4 chapters. So the first chapter is on Samadhi. It is called Samadhi Pada, the chapter on Samadhi. The second chapter is on the practices, Sadhana Pada. This is where we find Patanjali's treatment of asanas, pranayama, and so forth. The third chapter consists of the extraordinary powers. What are the powers or the benefits that accrue as a result of yoga sadhana? So this is on yogic powers called Vibhuti Pada. What are the Vibhutis, the great powers that come to the yogi? And the final chapter, the fourth chapter, is on Kaivalyam. Kaivalya means complete freedom, solitude, freedom. And the Kaivalya Pada talks about what is the nature of Kaivalyam. He even defines what is Kaivalyam in the fourth chapter. So I would like to highlight the fact that most people associate yoga with just postures or just breath work. That comprises of a very tiny segment of Yoga Sutras. So only 3 sutras of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras talk about asanas. Only 6 sutras talk about pranayama. So it's a very thin slice of the broad spectrum of yoga. So what do the other sutras talk about? What is the essence of the Yoga Sutras? What is the yoga of the Yoga Sutras? So that is what I wish to present in the subsequent slides here. So let us start by looking at what is the first few sutras that Patanjali presents. The first sutra, he says, Atha Yoga Anushasanam. Atha Yoga Anushasanam. The word shasanam means discipline. Shasanam means discipline or self-regulation. Discipline or regulating oneself. So this might seem a little bit paradoxical at first, because the final goal of yoga is kaivalyam, which we just defined as freedom. Yet the very first sutra of Patanjali, he says that yoga is a discipline. So discipline appears to be an opposite of freedom. To be fully free, that means we are not bound by, we are not shackled by any restrictions or regulation or rules or laws. But here Patanjali says that shasanam, rules, abiding by the rules, we gain freedom. And it is not just shasanam, he uses the word anushasanam, anu, the prefix. The prefix anushasanam here refers to self-inspired discipline. Self-inspired. In other words, we are doing the practice of yoga by our own proactive choice. It is not because somebody else has dragged us into the yoga mat, maybe our spouse or a friend. No, we are doing the practice of yoga willingly. We see the value of this practice and we are willingly inviting the practice of yoga in our life. So this is Anushasanam. And what is the purpose of disciplining ourselves? And in fact, Bhagavad Gita talks about it in a very clear manner. The true joy, Satvika Sukham, happens when there is the short-term discomfort that gives long-term joy. So the willingness to go through a short-term discomfort to experience a long-term or eternal joy is called Satvik Sukham. And for that, we need self-discipline. For example, once we discipline ourselves with daily exercise, maybe yoga asanas and pranayama and meditation, dhyanam and so forth, at the end of the practice, we feel absolutely exuberantly healthy. There is clarity of mind, lightness in the body, but it requires a little bit of going through some discomfort. We have to wake up the body, drag the unwilling body into the yoga mat. The body is saying, no, let me sleep for 5 more minutes. But we have to go through that discomfort. And when we go through the discomfort, this is called tapas, willingness to go through some discomfort in order to experience a higher joy. So for that reason, Patanjali begins by saying Anushasanam, yoga as a self-inspired discipline. And in the very next sutra, he defines what is yoga. And Patanjali defines yoga as Chittavritti Nirodha. Yoga, Chittavritti Nirodha. I will give a short translation of it now, and then I will come back to it by looking at the broader definition of yoga. So the literal translation of this is yoga is the restraining of the activities of the mind. So the word vritti means activity. So when we want to ask somebody, what do you do for a living? So in Sanskrit, we describe that as vritti. Somebody's vritti is what do they do in their life? What is their life activity? Maybe they're a teacher, maybe they're an artist or engineer or musician, whatever it is. Activity is vritti. And the activities of the chitta is called chitta vritti. And the word chitta, I have loosely translated here as the mind, but it has a bigger meaning. Perhaps a little later, we will see what is the true meaning of chitta. So chitta, we can now think of it as the mind. So the chitta vritti is the activities of the mind. So when the mind is restless, we are not abiding in ourselves. We are not understanding the truth of who we are. Just like on a lake, when the surface of the lake is very turbulent, you cannot see the depth of that lake. But when the lake is tranquil, you can see the depth of that lake. So like that, when the mind is silent, when the mind is not overactive, when the chitta vrittis have reduced, Patanjali says in another sutra, Kshina vrittehe, when the vrittis has become so small that the mind becomes crystal clear. Kshina vrittehe abhijatasya manehe, Patanjali says in another sutra. So when the vrittis becomes small and the mind in that state becomes crystal clear, absolutely crystal clear state of mind. And then yoga happens. That state of mind is defined as yoga. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. So what is the use of this state? And why does Patanjali define yoga this way? We will see in a little more detail. So before that, let's take a step back and ask ourselves, what is the dictionary definition of yoga? What are the different definitions of yoga that we see? So one place to start our inquiry on what is yoga, because the topic of today is yoga of the Yoga Sutras. So which flavor, which definition of yoga does Patanjali ascribe to in his Yoga Sutras? So when we look at the dictionary definition of yoga, so what is the dictionary that we are referring to here? It is the classic Dhatu Patha of the great grammarian, the father of Sanskrit grammar, Panini. So when we look up the Dhatu Patha, dhatus are verb roots. So Dhatu Patha is the compilation of about 2000 verb roots that capture the meaning of the different words in Sanskrit. Most of the words in Sanskrit have been derived from these verb roots. So when we look up the Dhatu Patha and understand what is the meaning of yoga, we see the root word of yoga, the root word is yuj. And the root word, the dhatu, yuj, has been defined in 3 places in the Dhatu Patha. So what are the 3 definitions that Panini gives in his dictionary called Dhatu Patha? The first definition is Yujir Yoge. Yujir Yoge means to unite, union of 2 things, uniting in harmony. That is one definition. And many yoga texts, such as, for example, Yoga Yajnavalkya, defines yoga as the union of Jivatman and the Paramatman. So samyogam of Jivatma and Paramatma, the individual self with the cosmic self. That union is defined as yoga according to Yoga Yajnavalkya. Patanjali, in his definition, so let me go back to the previous slide, he doesn't talk about yoga as a union. He says chitta vritti nirodha. So The great Maharishi Vyasa, in his commentary on the Yoga Sutras, he says that Patanjali's definition is in line with the second definition that we see here of Panini in the Dhatu Pata. The second definition is Yuja Samadhau. That means yoga is samadhi. Samadhi. In fact, the very first statement in Vyasa's commentary on the Yoga Sutras is Yoga Samadhi. Yoga is samadhi. He equates yoga to an equanimous state of mind. Sama means equanimous or same. Dhi is the intellect. So all our inner faculties are in equilibrium. They are not jumping up and down. They are in equilibrium. So this state of samadhi is yoga. That's the second definition according to Panini. And the word yuj, the dhatu yuj, appears the third time as yuja samyamane in the dhatu pata. Another definition, yuja samyamane. Samyama means complete control. The word yama means control. Samyama means total control, complete control of the mind. So what does samyama mean? Patanjali himself talks about a technical definition of samyama. So he says that the mind has three superpowers. Patanjali says our mind has three superpowers. And once we master all these three aspects, all these three superpowers, then the mind is in a state of samyama. So what are the three superpowers? The first superpower is the power of the mind to focus. Dharana, this is called dharana, the ability of the mind to be one-pointed. My teacher used to say that when the mind is in pieces, there is no peace of mind. A divided mind is not very powerful. So when you unite the mind, consolidate the mind, and direct the mind to one place, that is dharana, that is a superpower. The second superpower is the ability of the mind to be tranquil, to be peaceful. And the third superpower is the ability of the mind to be in equilibrium, in samadhi. Samadhi. So these are the three superpowers of the mind. And once all these three superpowers are concurrently active, in other words, the mind is focused, the mind is tranquil, and the mind is in equilibrium at the same time, then the mind is in samyama. And this is the state of yoga. So this is the third definition. And apart from these three definitions of Panini, that Panini gives on yoga, on yuj, the dhatu from which the word yoga has been constructed, there are other definitions as well. For example, yoga also refers to apraptasya praptihi. In Sanskrit, it is defined as apraptasya praptihi. That means gaining something that we did not have before, something that we want to possess, that we don't have now, and when we gain it, apraptasya praptihi, that is also called yoga. And in fact, there is one famous shloka in the Bhagavad Gita that uses this definition of yoga, gaining something that we don't have before. So let me quote that shloka from the Bhagavad Gita. It's a very famous shloka from 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. It says, Ananyas chintayanto mam yejana paryupasate tesham nityabhiyuktanam yoga kshemam vahamyaham. So Lord Krishna says, I bestow yoga and kshema. Yoga is the ability to gain something that we didn't have before, and kshema is ability to protect what we already gained. So that is one more definition of yoga, to gain something that we did not have before, yoga. And there is one more definition. Yoga parinamaha. Yoga is transformation. In some scholars, they define yoga as also a state of transformation. For example, transforming coal into diamond. Both are forms of carbon. But diamond somehow is much more precious. We find diamond more valuable, more precious than the form of carbon that we call coal. So like that, when we transform our mind from a clouded mind, as they say, brain fog, when there is brain fog, we don't feel very good. But when we transform the same mind from a clouded mind into a crystal clear mind, that transformation is also called yoga. So these are different definitions of yoga. And Patanjali's definition, to go back to it, yoga chitta vritti nirodha, it is in alignment with the second definition, according to Sage Vyasa, the second definition given by Panini, which is yuja samadhau, yoga samadhihi, according to Vyasa in his commentary on the Yoga Sutras. Now, Swami Vivekananda has put it very nicely in a very picturesque form, the quality of our mind when it is not in yoga. So let me read this very beautiful statements that he makes on hyperactive mind. The human mind is like that monkey. Monkey is already restless, right? But Swami Vivekananda says that it is not just a simple monkey, but it is a drunk monkey, intoxicated monkey. So the human mind is like that monkey, incessantly active by its own nature, and it becomes drunk with the wine of desire, thus increasing its turbulence. After desire takes possession, it comes the sting of the scorpion of jealousy at the success of others. And last of all, the demon of pride enters the mind, making it think itself of all importance. How hard it is to control such a mind. So the mind is like a monkey, not just a monkey, but an intoxicated monkey whose tail has been bitten by a scorpion, and the demon of pride has entered the mind of the monkey. So such is the mind that we are trying to control. Trying to control this monkey mind is what chitta vritti nirodha is all about. So how is this restraint helpful when we are silencing the mind, when we are bringing tranquility to the mind? So the reason why this is helpful to us is because it's going to transform our mind into a crystal clear state of mind. And why is that necessary? In the very next sutra, Patanjali says, Tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. Tada means then. When, kada, when the mind is in a tranquil state, when the chitta vritti nirodha has been achieved, tada drashtuhu, the seer, abides in the nature of the self. So that's what Patanjali says here. Drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. The seer abides in their nature. In fact, the word for health in Sanskrit is swastha. Swastha. Swastha literally means standing in ourself, abiding in ourself. So you can expand swastha as swarupe avasthanam. When you expand what health is, true exuberant health is when we are abiding in ourself. So when the mind is tranquil, that is the foundation for exuberant health. That is the foundation for swastha, swarupe avasthanam, exuberant health. So when the mind is quiet, that is the basis from which the physical health and the mental well-being can arise from that state of mind. So what happens when we are not in that state? When we are not in that state of yoga, when the mind is restless, when there is incessant activity in the mind, incessant traffic of thoughts in the mind. This is what we find ourselves. Most of the time, the mind is in such a state. We want to quiet the mind, but the mind has so much momentum of thoughts. And most of our thoughts, when we examine, they are not high quality, Nobel Prize winning thoughts, right? They're mundane thoughts, trivial thoughts that's going to help nobody. So most of our energy, our prana, we deplete in unnecessary thoughts. Bhagavad Gita captures this very beautifully. Krishna says in one of the shlokas in the 18th chapter, Athatvartavad alpam cha tat tamasamudahritam. Alpam. Alpam means trivial or mundane. Most of the time, our mind is filled with alpajnanam, trivial knowledge. So how do we conserve our energy so that we don't deplete it in unnecessary knowledge or unnecessary train of thought. That is what yoga is about. So what Patanjali says here is, if the mind is not tranquil, if the chitta vritti nirodha is not happening, then the seer identifies with the mind's activities. We assume ourselves to be who we are not. For example, if we ask somebody, who are you? Our first response could be what we are doing. I am a student, I am a mother, I am a brother, I am an engineer, I am an architect, I am a teacher, like that. We give the roles that we play. We identify ourselves with the roles that we play. Sometimes we even identify ourselves with the predicament that we are experiencing. For example, many times we say, I am hungry. I am hungry. But the truth of the matter is, the body is experiencing hunger. But we associate our identity with what we are experiencing. I am hungry. So, like that, we identify ourselves with the form of the vrittis. That's what Patanjali says. And in order to appreciate like this predicament of misidentification, one way to see that is when we look at ourselves, when we look at our body in a reflection, and say we are looking at a mirror, and if the mirror is distorted, convex, concave, distortion, then the mirror presents to us a distorted version of reality. It does not present the perfect replica of reality. Right? It presents a distorted version. And Patanjali says that is exactly what is happening when there are chitta vrittis. Patanjali says that all our experience that we gather from the outside world, it is brought in to the mind, it is brought in to the seer through the lens of the mind, lens of the chitta. Chitta is the lens through which we experience the world. We bring in the world through our mind. We bring in the world and our own experience of our body, etc., through the lens of chitta. Now, if the chitta is distorted because of chitta vrittis, then we are not seeing the world as it is. Perhaps we are seeing a snake as a rope, or rather, we are seeing a rope as a snake. It's a classic example that is given in the Vedantic texts. Rajju Sarpa Bhranti, thinking of a harmless rope as a violent snake. Sometimes we have this misperception. And according to the Yoga Sutras, most of the time we are misperceiving things. We are misperceiving because the chitta is playing tricks. The distortion that happens in our chitta in the form of chitta vrittis is presenting a distorted replica of reality. And the whole wisdom of yoga rests on Sankhya. And Sankhya says that if you see the truth as it is, you will be a liberated person. When you see the absolute truth, the universal truth, then you will automatically be in samadhi. And an example they give for that is, suppose a prince forgets that he is the inheritor of great wealth and power, but they are leading a life of a pauper begging on the street. When they suddenly discover the truth of who they are, you can imagine how happy they will be, right? How liberated from all the hardships and all the sufferings. So, such is the state of a person when they awaken themselves to the truth. It is the distorted chitta that prevents us from recognizing this truth. So, when the mind is tranquil, chitta vritti nirodha happens, then as a result of that, we are able to see the truth as it is. That is called samyak khyati. That is what Sankhya is, samyak khyati. Samyak khyayate prakashyate vastu tattvam anaya iti Sankhya. It's the definition of Sankhya. And when we are seeing the undistorted truth, then we are awakening into the state of samadhi. So this is the value of quieting the mind so that we don't distort what we see. And in fact, Patanjali makes this very bold statement. the root cause of all suffering. He makes this absolutely bold statement. The root cause of all suffering is the confusion between who I am and who I am not. So this sutra appears in the second chapter. Drashtu drishyayoho sanyogo heya hetuhu. The mixing up of drashta and the drishyam. So drashtu drishyayoho sanyogo heya hetuhu. The mixing up of the seer and the scenery is the root cause of all suffering. For example, the misidentification that I am the body. And then we go about bringing all the comfort to the body, thinking that I am the body. I'll be happy when I make the body comfortable. Not recognizing that body is a tool, it's an instrument that we have. We are beyond the body. So when we go about our life, bringing more and more comfort to the body and ignoring who we are, then there comes a stage where we become comfortably unhappy. This is the predicament for most people. The body is comfortable. We have a nice pillow. We have a nice comfort, physical comfort perhaps. But inside, there is still the seed of unhappiness. So in order to remove that misery, the root cause of suffering, Patanjali says that we need clear distinction between who I am and who I am not. This is what he calls Viveka Khyati. Viveka means the ability to resolve between two things that are very close, such as who I am and who I am not. So this is called Viveka, Viveka Khyati. That means the absolute clear perception that is able to resolve the difference between who I am and who I am not. Okay, so for the sake of time, I will just go through the remainder of the slides a little faster pace. So who am I? So according to the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali gives 4 attributes of the self. Who am I? He says the self is Nitya Shuchi Sukha Atma. So this teaching is from the 5th sutra of the second chapter. 5th sutra of the second chapter. So he talks about the nature of the self. So the self has 4 components. Nitya means it is eternal. Although the body is born and it is subject to death, but the self of who we are, the core of who we are, is eternal. It is pure, Shuchi, pure. It is untainted by whatever experiences that the mind goes through. The mind can go through a roller coaster ride of emotions, sometimes depressed, sometimes elevated, sometimes elated. So all these life experiences does not touch the core of who we are. The self is always pure. It is Shuchi. And then it is Sukha. In fact, Patanjali says that the true happiness comes from the self. It is not coming from objects outside or events outside. The true source of happiness is the self. So Nitya, Shuchi, Sukha, and then Atma. Atma means indivisible. In fact, the English word atom and the Sanskrit word Atma, they come from the same root. So, for example, the word atom, when it was coined, it referred to the smallest, the particle that you can divide a substance and you cannot cut it further. So anything that can be cut is the opposite of that, which is called anatma. Anatma means that which can be cut. The opposite of atma is anatma. And in fact, the English word anatomy, it comes from anatma, that which can be cut, it can be dissected. Whereas the self cannot be cut. It is atma, it is indivisible. So this is the definition of, these are the 4 attributes of the self that Patanjali gives. Patanjali's description of the nature of the self. Okay, and then Patanjali goes on to say how the chitta vritti nirodha can be achieved. He says there are 2 sadhanas. There are 2 things that we need to observe. They are abhyasa and vairagya. Abhyasa means practices, yoga practices. And vairagya means non-attachment or dispassion or centeredness. Very difficult to translate the word vairagya clearly in one English word. And we will see the exact definition that Patanjali gives a little later. So these are the two aspects, practice and dispassion, the two keys that are needed to unlock the power of the mind, to make the mind crystal clear and tranquil. In fact, Patanjali, when he gives the sutra, he echoes Bhagavad Gita's teachings. Bhagavad Gita, in the 6th chapter, Arjuna asks this question: Chanchalam hi manah Krishna pramati balavadridam tasyaham nigraham manye vayoriva sudushkaram. Arjuna says, Oh Krishna, you're asking me to meditate and quiet the mind, but you know what? My mind is so restless like the wind, like a hurricane. So this is the symbol of the hurricane. Right? So he says, Arjuna says, my mind is like the category 6 hurricane, the most intense, most unruly hurricane. How do you expect me to quiet this restless mind? And in response to that, Krishna says, Abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha grihhyate. So he says, he starts by saying, Asamshayam mahabaho. No doubt what you say is correct. Krishna agrees with Arjuna. Asamshayam mahabaho. Mano durnigraham chalam. Mind is unruly. But Krishna says, Abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha grihhyate. Through abhyasa and vairagya, the mind can be brought under control. The mind can be silenced. It can be transformed to a place of tranquility. It is possible through abhyasa and vairagya. And what are abhyasa and vairagya? Abhyasa is all the practices that we do to quiet the mind in order to be abiding in ourself. And then Patanjali goes on to describe what are the 4 ingredients of a high quality yoga practice. So let me briefly go through this sutra, because during New Year, right, many people take New Year's resolution. Dhriti, this is called resolve, dhriti in Sanskrit. So when we take New Year's resolution, my teacher used to say, a lot of people come, more people come in the first week of the new year, and then by Shankarantri, they forget about yoga practice. You see, that means the strength of the resolve is not very good. The resolve was very weak. But if you really want to benefit from the abhyasa, Patanjali here gives the ingredients of the 4 items or the 4 things, the 4 ingredients of a high quality yoga practice. What are they? Tatu dirgha kala. The practice should be done for a long time. That means several months, several years. In fact, the true benefits of yoga is in the long term. And then it should be consistently practiced, nairantarya. It should be practiced with enthusiasm, satkara. And then asevito, seva means to serve. So we do the practice with an attitude of serving the body and the mind, because these are the vehicles that carry us through our entire life experience in this lifetime. And dhrida bhumihi, when all these 4 ingredients are active, then the benefits of yoga are firmly grounded. So dirghakala, nairantarya, satkara, asevito, dhrida bhumihi. So 4 ingredients of a high quality yoga practice. And what is vairagya? Patanjali defines vairagya in 2 sutras. In the first sutra, Drishtanushravika Vishaya Vitrishnasya Vashikara Samya Vairagyam, he says, I'll translate it very briefly for the sake of time. He says, not expecting happiness from outside objects, not having a thirst or a craving for happiness, thinking that outside objects or situations or events will make me happy. Having the clarity of mind, nothing outside of me can make me happy. And in the second part, the very next sutra, he says, Tatparam Purushakhyate Gunavaitrishnyam, and recognizing the true source of happiness as coming from within. So Vairagya has 2 parts. First, to identify where the happiness is not, and then recognizing where the happiness is, namely from the self. Okay. So in the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali talks about what specific practices that we need to do. What are the abhyasas? And he gives 3 streams of abhyasas. He gives 3 separate paths of yoga, 3 separate abhyasas, 3 systems of yoga. And why does he give three systems? Because depending on the ability of the student, whether they are adept yogis, whether perhaps they are naturally born yogi, or whether they're novice students of yoga, beginning students of yoga, or whether they're intermediate level. So depending on that, there are three systems that Patanjali gives. So Samadhi Yoga, where Patanjali gives practices directly that deal with the mind, is given for adept yogis. And this is the topic of the first chapter of the Yoga Sutra. And then for novice yogis, beginning students of yoga, gives the knowledge of Kriya Yoga, the yoga of activity or the yoga of action, because it is easier to control the body than to control the mind. It is easier to give instruction to act rather than giving instructions to change the state of the mind. So Kriya Yoga start with what we can control, namely our actions. So actions are easier than controlling the mind. So this is Kriya Yoga. It is given in the first half of the second chapter. And the Ashtanga Yoga, which is perhaps the most popular or most famous teachings of Maharishi Patanjali, the eight limbs of yoga, which is a holistic practice that combines eight segments of abhyasas. So that is given in the second half of the second chapter and in the first few sutras of the third chapter. So this employs a holistic system of practices that combines asana, pranayama, and also on how to live our life, living a life with integrity. Yoga is not something that we do only inside a yoga mat, but also how we spend each and every moment of our life, whether inside or outside the yoga mat. In fact, when people used to approach my teacher and ask him, how much time should I practice yoga every day? And he will always start by saying 24 hours, because being a yogi is not a part-time job. Being a yogi, we have to live the life every moment as a yogi. And then, of course, he will clarify that saying, okay, if you want to do the abhyasas, the practice of asanas, pranayama, etc., and you will give the time half an hour or 1 hour and so forth. But it is very important to remember that every moment of our life, we can practice yoga. We can use it as an opportunity to practice abhyasa and vairagya. So in the system of Ashtanga Yoga, we also see the yamas and niyamas, living a life of ethics, even when nobody is watching, living a life of integrity, being truthful, honesty, non-violence, and so forth. So for example, ahimsa, satya, steya, brahmacharya, parigraha, yamaha. Yama, the very first limb of yoga. And there are five aspects to the first limb of yoga, which is yama, which is it starts with ahimsa, non-violence. So all these are included as part of this holistic Ashtanga yoga. So this is a brief overview of the three systems of yoga. And in the final slide, I just want to give a bullet points of what are the some of the other topics that Patanjali describes in his Yoga Sutras. And you will see he gives a very thorough and a systematic analysis of yoga and its benefits. For example, he enumerates what are the five vrittis of the mind, the fivefold chitta vrittis. What are the four ingredients of a high quality yoga practice that we saw in the previous slide? What are the 9 obstacles in the path of yoga along with their 5 symptoms? What are the 9 methods to overcome obstacles in the path of yoga? What are the 3 components of Kriya Yoga, the yoga of action? What are the 5 kleshas or the afflictions of the mind? 3 types of suffering, 8 limbs of yoga, 3 superpowers of the mind, 3 consequences of the law of karma. He talks about the law of karma. And then he talks about the siddhis, the extraordinary powers of these yoga practices and the nature of kaivalya. So to conclude, I just want to mention 2 very important aspects. When we study the Yoga Sutras, one aspect of yoga is to enter into that space of samadhi. So we experience absolute bliss. that untainted, blissful experience, samadhi. And that state of mind, that happy, blissful state of mind, is combined with a powerful state of mind where we unleash all our latent potential. We become very powerful. With the practice of yoga, it unleashes the superpowers of the mind. According to use the words of one of my teachers, Sri Ravi Shankarji, he says, yoga is so every human being has latent potential in them, just like the bud has the potential to blossom fully. The blossoming of human potential to fullness is yoga. So rather than using only a tiny fraction of our inner potential, to blossom the inner potential to fullness is yoga. So it's a beautiful blend of experience and effectiveness. That is what we see in the Yoga Sutras. And with all this wisdom and the practices that go along, it is such a beautiful uh, presentation that Patanjali gives in the Yoga Sutras. And to circle back to where we started out, I want to reiterate that statement that when we understand these principles of yoga from the Yoga Sutras, it profoundly elevates the quality of our yoga practice. So with that, allow me to conclude, and over to you, Ankurji. And if you want, we can have a few question and answers session.
No, that was amazing, Shriramji. And even Dr. Kuldeep Deeman, one of our other faculty, says, very well done, Shriramji. And you talk about it, right? Patanjali systematically covered yoga and so many aspects of it. I think you did that also in 1 hour. You systematically explained what is in all of those sutras and laid it out and explained it very well. I think you did justice to the Yoga Sutras in a short 1 hour webinar. And I think the reactions that we're getting from the audience are showing that as well. Thank you so much. Yeah, Chandrasekhar says this is a very quick and very comprehensive way to present the introduction of the Yoga Sutras. Exactly, this is just the introduction. So we have the whole course. I've dropped a link in the chat. It's going to be on Saturdays at 11 a.m. Eastern time. It's going to be an hour and a half. And just like this, Shriramji is going to go through presentations. It's going to be on our learning management system. You'll have readings, you'll have translations, you'll have everything you need to really understand the Yoga Sutras. And as we talked about, get to that clarity of mind. I feel like this is the course that I should be taking, except I have to host the webinars on Saturday mornings. But I'm going to launch this quick poll. So let us know if you are interested in taking the course specifically. And this course is also part of our certificate program in Hindu studies. So it's not just about one course or learning one sutra, right? It's about this collective body of information and applying it. So I also have, if you're interested in enrolling in a program at HOA, you can let us know. So with those two polls, let us know. We have a couple questions. I like this one from iPhone Kutialaji. Does Patanjali also explain the process of perception formation? Perception formation. That seems like a pretty heavy concept. What are your thoughts?
Yes, in fact, one of the vrittis that Patanjali talks about uh, is called pramana. Pramana. So pramana means our means of knowledge. How do we know things? And how do we gather information? As part of that pramana, so pramana is one of the five vrittis, and pramana itself, Maharishi Patanjali classifies into three streams, that is, three means through which we gather knowledge. And one of them, he says, is perception through our senses. So that is called pratyaksha. Pratyaksha means the knowledge that we gather through our senses. And the other two are uh, the analysis that we do with our intellect. That gives us additional knowledge. For example, if we see a smoke somewhere, then our intellect says, oh, there should be fire there. Or if we step outside our home and we see that the road is wet, then we recognize, oh, it must have rained. So that is the anumana, inferential knowledge. And the third one is agama. So pratyaksha, anumana, agamaha, pramanani, Patanjali says. So agama means authoritative knowledge or uh, the expert testimony. For example, all of us agree that there is an electron inside an atom, but nobody has seen it. We have not verified whether what the scientists are saying is indeed true, but we take their word for it. In fact, much of our life experience depends on this agama. We rely, we trust others. So these are the three streams of knowledge. And as I said, the first one is the pratyaksha, the knowledge that we gather through our senses. In fact, Patanjali talks about the inputs that we receive through the senses as ahara. Ahara means food. We usually associate food with ahara. Sanskrit word ahara means food. But here we expand the definition of ahara to include whatever we consume through our senses. The food for thought. We can say the food for thought. Okay, so this is what Patanjali says regarding our perception. I just want to add one more aspect to it. Later on in the first chapter of the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali says that when you reach higher and higher states of samadhi, especially there's one stage of samadhi called nirvichara samadhi. In nirvichara samadhi, your perception grows so refined, so keen, so sensitive that you are able to perceive or cognize higher truths, revelations. You can say intuitions or revelations. So this is also a form of perception. You're able to perceive things that perhaps others are not able. It's like the great genius Ramanujan, the great mathematician, who was able to cognize such amazing mathematical discoveries that other people found it hard. And in order to perceive such higher truths, we quiet the mind and bring the mind to higher and higher stages of samadhi. And then Patanjali, interestingly, he talks about this. He says, Shrutanumana pragyabhyam anya vishaya visheshar tatvat. The knowledge that is gained by this heightened perception, this revelatory or intuitive knowledge, is far superior to the knowledge that we receive through our senses or through second-hand testimony when somebody tells us and we take their word for it. So it's like a superior knowledge. And this is also described by the commentators of the Yoga Sutras as yogika pratyaksham, yogic perception, yogika pratyaksham. And an example of that we see in the Bhagavad Gita itself, when Arjuna sees the divine form, the cosmic form of Krishna. So Krishna says, Divyam dadami te chakshuhu. I am going to give you divine eyes through which you will be able to see things that you cannot see through your physical eyes. So this expanded global vision where you are able to perceive something far superior is called yogika pratyaksham. So these are some of the things that we can talk about in the Yoga Sutras and combined with other texts such as the Bhagavad Gita.
Dr. Sarvatam didn't say it like this, but I will. To reach a higher level of samadhi, enroll in this course, right? It connects, you can feel it from just this one presentation that his course is going to be amazing. Nalini ji is saying, I'm already registered for the course and looking forward to it so much. Thank you so much. Excellent presentation, says Teresa. We have a few more questions. If you haven't filled out the poll, please let us know if you're interested in the course or maybe a program or both. Nalini Om has her hand up. I don't know if you have a specific question. Please type in the chat. Let me know. Chandrakanji is asking or kind of stating, and maybe you can clarify the connection, the interplay between yoga and meditation, because he's feeling that sometimes they're interchangeable. And he's asking, is that right? I don't think yoga and meditation are interchangeable. There's nuances to it, but please share your thoughts on these two important ideas that sometimes get confused.
So let's first get clarity on yoga and meditation, right? So when we say yoga and meditation, it's actually an oxymoron, right? The thing is, meditation is part of yoga. It's a subset of yoga. Most people associate yoga with just postures. So if we have this incorrect perception Patanjali calls it viparya. Viparya means misunderstanding. So if we misunderstand yoga to be just postures, so in that state, we might think of yoga and meditation as two separate things, but meditation is actually an integral part of yoga. Dhyanam, which is the Sanskrit word for meditation, is one of the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga. In fact, it's the 7th limb of Ashtanga Yoga, Dhyana. Dhyana is an integral part of the yoga sadhana. And in that sense, so when we think of the limbs of yoga, Ashta Anga, Anga means limbs. Each limb is crucial. Just like when you look at the formation, the form of the human body, so all limbs are important. The hands, the legs, the arms, and so forth. All the limbs are equally important. And so when we combine all of these limbs of yoga, there is a power that comes which is far superior to when we do only one limb of Ashtanga Yoga. For example, if somebody says, my favorite part of yoga is asanas because I get bored during meditation, or I don't see the value in pranayama, I'm just touching my nose. What is the value of pranayama? I find it boring, it's not entertaining. So if we chop only a tiny segment of yoga, we miss out on the larger benefits of yoga, because the true benefits of yoga comes from this combination. So let me make this statement. It's a very important statement. The combination of the 8 limbs of yoga is extraordinarily powerful. They work in synergy. What is synergy? Synergy means the whole is more powerful than the sum of its parts, right? The combination is more powerful than the sum of its parts. It's like saying 1 + 1 = 3. So that is the power of Ashtanga Yoga. You combine all these 8 practices, which includes meditation, then the benefits is far more profound. So let me give a quick example. Suppose somebody says, I'm going to practice only meditation. I'm not going to practice asanas because I'm an armchair yogi, right? We see some people are armchair yogi. They don't want to jump into a yoga mat, but they can sit in the same place for long periods of time. When we focus only on meditation, what happens is when we sit with our eyes closed, 2 minutes into the meditation, we become keenly aware of the discomforts of the body, right? Oh, my low back hurts, discomfort in the knee, itching in my face, scratching there. So the body torments you with all its discomforts. But if we practice asanas before we jump into meditation, so what is the benefits of asana? In fact, Patanjali gives very clear benefits. What is the benefit of asanas, pranayama, etc. So one of the benefits of asanas is, in fact, 2 benefits of asanas. One is it allows the body to be stable, stiram. It allows the body to be stable so that you can sit immobile for long periods of time. And the second benefit is that the body feels so light. Hatha Yoga Pratipika calls it angalagavam. Angalagavam means lightness of the body feels so light that it doesn't trap you with its discomforts, but it frees you. You can forget the body and dive deep into the inner Disneyland. So inner space of samadhi. So the body doesn't trouble you when we practice asanas first and then when we sit for meditation. So like that, each limb of yoga benefits the other limb. That's why this combination is so extraordinarily powerful. And yes, meditation is an integral part of yoga.
Great, thank you for that. Pia was asking, do you have a longer course on the Yoga Sutras by Dr. Shiramji? She feels 8 weeks is not enough. Actually, this course is going to be 11 weeks. And Dr. Sarvatam teaches many courses at HOA. We're on a quarter system. So every 3 months, we offer a new set of courses. If you haven't taken any courses at HOA, this is a great one to start with. Please do consider enrolling.
So just a quick comment on that.
Yeah.
So this course is mostly an introduction in the sense that each of the 11 sessions, we are going to have a certain theme, and then we'll explore that theme from the Yoga Sutras. For example, the first session is on the definition of yoga. And one of the sessions will be on Kriya Yoga. What is Kriya Yoga according to Patanjali, and so forth. 2 or 3 sessions will be on Ashtanga Yoga, like that. So each session is thematic. And there is also a proposal for maybe in a year or so to have a part 2 of this, where we dive deeper and examine all of the 195 sutras. So that is also a course that is in the planning stages as well.
Another kind of 2 questions in a row, Jayashriji and Pathakji. First one says there's no yoga poses described in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. So then where did all the poses come from? Who described them? How did that come about? Because again, that's the order of operations and how Patanjali was able to codify, systematically present information that was there before. And that was Pathakji's comment, right? Knowledge of yoga is before Patanjali, but then there's this whole process and he gets so much credit for putting it together. So if you have some thoughts on that.
Yes, in fact, as we saw before, that one of the definition of sutra is alpaksharam. That's one of the attributes of a sutra form of writing, to capture the essence of that subject in as few words as possible. So Patanjali does not want to give examples. These are the asanas. He doesn't want to name examples. He just gives 3 sutras on asanas. The first sutra defines what is asana. Second sutra talks about how to hold the asana, how to be when we are doing the asana. And the third sutra talks about the core benefit of doing the asana. So Patanjali does not give any examples, specific practices of asanas or even pranayama and so forth. All the specific asanas that we see in modern yoga books, right? Like when you see pictures of postures, so they come from other texts. For example, classic Hatha Yoga texts such as Hatha Yoga Pradipika, Shiva Samhita, Geranda Samhita, and so forth. And in fact, Sage Vyasa's commentary on the Yoga Sutras also gives some examples of, if I remember correctly, I think Vyasa Bhashya has about 8 postures that he gives as examples when he talks about the asana sections of the Yoga Sutras. So you will see the actual asanas, examples, and their unique benefits in other texts.
Arunji is asking, what is the difference between nirvikalpa and savikalpa samadhi?
Yes, in fact, this is a big topic that Patanjali uh, gives, the classification of samadhi. And in the first chapter, he talks about 7 or 12 types of samadhi, depending on how you count, because there are subtypes and sub-classification of samadhis. He starts out by saying vitarka, vichara, ananda, asmita. So there are 4 types: vitarka samadhi, vicharanugama samadhi, anandanugama samadhi, like that. And then the vitarka is further subdivided into savitarka, nirvitarka. Vichara is subdivided into savichara, nirvichara. In fact, Patanjali does not use the words nirvikalpa. He uses nirvichara and then nirbija, sabija, etc. The exact word nirvikalpa is not used. And later on in the 4th chapter, Patanjali also describes what is called the Dharma Megha Samadhi. Dharma Megha Samadhi. So these are different classifications of Samadhi experience. Let me give a tiny example. So what is Vitarka Samadhi? Vitarka means we are using logic to experience higher and higher states of Samadhi. For example, studying the Yoga Sutras or even just discussing about the sutras like we did today, it gives us a good feeling, right? We are able to elevate our experience just by engaging our intellect and using logical discussions. It elevates our experience. This is a type of samadhi. It's a vitarkanugama samadhi. It's a vitarka samadhi. Vichara is a more contemplation, inquiry. Who am I? That is vichara. So that is the inquiry by especially Sage Ramana Maharishi. He gave that practice, the vichara of who am I. and so forth. So these are the different classifications of samadhi. And let me just also briefly mention, it's fascinating to compare and contrast between the different types of bliss states described in different texts. Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras talks about the different flavors of samadhi experience. They are qualitatively different. Vitarka and Vichara is very different. Whereas some other texts talk about a quantitative difference in the states of happiness, quantitative uh, understanding of the happy states, the blissful states, such as the Taittiriya Upanishad. So in the Taittiriya Upanishad, for example, uh, in the chapter on Anandavalli. So that Upanishad talks about, for example, music gives 100 times, a Manushya Gandharva experience 100 times as much happiness as a person whose all their desires, if you fulfill them, if you fulfill the desire, all the desires that a person has in their mind, they'll feel happy, right? 100 times that happiness is the happiness experienced by a Manushya Gandharva, a musician is able to experience 100 times that, and 100 times beyond that is by a Deva Gandharva. So like that, it talks about quantitative states of higher and higher, more and more states of happiness. Whereas Patanjali does a classification of happiness states. And in fact, the very first classification he makes is Samprajnata and Asamprajnata Samadhi. So, for example, the happiness that is gained by an alert, aware state of mind, where we're engaging the mind. Maybe when we are talking about, say, some mathematical ideas, some subtle mathematical ideas, where the mind is very alert. So that is one type of bliss experience. Another type could be a more relaxing experience. This could be asamprajnata samadhi, where you simply relax and say you're soaking yourself into the blissful music. So there's a soulful music that takes you to higher and higher states of happiness. The mind is not super alert. Maybe it's even half asleep. That state of mind, like twilight state of mind, where it takes you, transports you to a different space. So that is another type of samadhi. So like that, Patanjali makes classifications of different bliss experiences. My teacher used to describe it as, so if you go to the same restaurant multiple times, each time you will pick something different from the menu. So like that, Patanjali has given a menu of samadhi. So when you wake up this morning, you decide, okay, today I'm going to I'm going to focus on Savitarka Samadhi. Tomorrow you might choose some other Samadhi experience and so forth.
I don't think we're going to be able to get to all of the questions. We still have a few more. Maybe just a little general on the course. Ashwin Patel is asking what books do you use in the course, and if you want to just share a little bit about that. And I don't know if you see the Q&A box, but some of these questions you kind of tangentially answered because of the previous questions, but we're kind of at the end of our time. So however you want to use the last few minutes and make that last pitch, which I will also do. Please do take this course, the Yoga Sutras with Sriram Sarvatam. This is one of our stars, definitely, at HUA, Dr. Sriramji. I'll say it. It's a privilege, and just in this 1 hour webinar presentation, you can feel so much energy. I feel energy and just knowledge and sharing so many complicated ideas in a way that's easily digestible and understandable. And so in the course, you'll get a lot more of that. So please do consider enrolling in this course with Dr. Sarvatam. And with that, let me hand it to Dr. Sriram Sarvatam for some closing thoughts.
Yeah. So let me mention a couple of things. One is I'm just looking at a question on mantra, and after I respond to that, I'll also say a few more about words about the course and what books. I think that question also came up. So I see a question here on the mantras. Pallaviji is asking about meditation along with mantra uchara, that is chanting of the mantras. So in the Yoga Sutras, we do find reference to mantras and the practice of japa. So there is one sutra, in fact, the first sutra of the fourth chapter, Janma Aushadhi Mantra Tapas Samadhija Siddhayaha. So one of the ways to achieve the excellence or siddhi is by mantras. Mantras are very powerful. And so Patanjali does refer to the use of mantras. And he also specifically talks about the practice of japa. Japa is repeated chanting of the mantra. So you regurgitate the same mantra again and again because the mind is scattered now. So the way Patanjali describes this is our mind has two opposing tendencies. One tendency of the mind is to be one-pointed and be yogic. But it also has the opposite tendency where the mind is scattered and gets distracted. So it's like a seesaw. And whichever samskara or whichever habit is stronger will win the race, right? So if you want to strengthen the one-pointedness of the mind, one way to do that is to bring that same mantra again and again into the mind so that the mind does not have the opportunity to get distracted. You are bringing the same thought again and again in the mind, and this will increase the strength of the Nirodha Samskara. Nirodha Samskara is the ability of the mind to be consolidated and abide in the self. The opposite Samskara is called Vyuthana Samskara, distracted state of mind. So by mantra japa, we are actually strengthening the yogic samskara, which is called Nirodha Samskara. And there comes a time when the mind becomes so strong, this samskara becomes so strong that the mind can never get distracted unless you want to. Like you have the full control of how you engage the mind. So japa is a practice that is given in the Yoga Sutras. And finally, regarding the course, so what are some of the books? We do give 5 reference books. We don't really need any textbook or any other references during this course because we will be using slides just like I presented today, and I'll be sharing the slides during the course with everybody. And but if you want to go deeper in your study and also use as a reference, there are 5 books, and I'll mention one of them, which is like a scholarly work on the Yoga Sutras, which is a treatise that includes the Vyasa Bhashya, Sage Vyasa's commentary on the Yoga Sutras. So this is a classic work by Swami Hariharananda Aranya. Swami Hariharananda Aranya, who was a contemporary of Swami Vivekananda. He lived in Bengal, Swami Hariharananda Aranya. He lived in Bengal. He was a great Sankhya-charya. He could trace his Guru Sishya Parampara all the way to the propounder of Sankhya, namely Kapila. So he comes from that Sankhya tradition. And because yoga and Sankhya are so closely related, so this is a magnum opus reference for Yoga Sutras. And that is one of the reference texts that I always recommend. That is Swami Hariharananda's work on the Yoga Sutras. I forget the exact title. I believe it's the aphorisms of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras or something like that. If you search, if you ask Dr. Google, I'm sure you will be able to easily find the book. And one more thing I would like to mention regarding the course is I also learned so much during these courses. I think this is the 8th time that we are offering this course, the Yoga of the Yoga Sutras. Each time my own learning, because I am also a student of yoga, we are all learning together, Sangat Chadvam, as they say, we are all learning together. And my own clarity about yoga, the concepts presented in the Yoga Sutras, I'm also grateful to this experience that we are learning together.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Dr. Shyam Sarvatam. I'm happy to be learning with you also, and hosting these webinars. I learn a lot as well. And I think a lot of people today really appreciated this webinar. Kuldeep Deeman, Dr. Kuldeep Deeman says, Sriramji is a rare combination. Usually those who teach yoga practically do not have any knowledge of the Yoga Sutram, and those who teach Yoga Sutram lack practical experience. He combines both theory and practice. Those who enroll will surely benefit from this course. Thank you for that, Dr. Deeman.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Deeman. Of course, Dr. Deeman is very, very generous with his words of appreciation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sriram Sarvatham. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We'll see you on the next webinar or in a course. I'm Ankur Patel with Hindu University of America. Thank you so much. Dhanyavad.